just, as a little bit for our audiences and our listeners, you've had over 400 recordings and collaborations with artists on major record labels, independent record labels. And throughout your 40-year career, Brian, you've been local to upstate New York, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, I love it here.
I want to come back to your origin story in just a minute, but you call yourself or refer to yourself as an Udu boy. So I'd love to know, what is an Udu and what makes an Udu so special?
We have an amazing, really quite a remarkable artist that lives in Freehold, New York.
And what's his name?
His name is Frank Giorgini. Thank you.
Frank Giorgini.
Yeah, Frank Giorgini. And he is a master tile designer, sculptor, and he came to learn about the traditional art form of Nigerian pottery in the early 70s, I think around 73. He went to Haystacks, Maine, took a workshop with a visiting artisan from Nigeria. He's Hausa. His name is Abbas Ahuan, and he's a Cajun master potter. And these techniques that he was offering the U.S. through his cultural exchange, the Udu, the drum for his tribe of people, became part of his offering in teaching the pottery method. So Frank created these drums in the tradition, but percussionists from all over the world, especially in New York area,
they heard the Udu,
and saw it in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, because Frank's instruments are in the Metropolitan Museum of Arts. And so one thing led to another, and poor Frank, who was really working on putting his instruments in galleries around the world, was sort of dragged into the music industry.
And I know we're going to have a segment where you perform the Udu later in this episode, which is really, really cool. I also understand, too, what's really neat about the Udu is not only that Hausa people in Nigeria use it, but I understand Igbo women from southern Nigeria use this as well. So it's traditionally like a women's instrument. But it sounds like, your work with Frank Giorgini really kind of brought this instrument into the hands of people of other genders, people of other nationalities, and it became kind of part of this marketplace, which is really neat.
Right, and so Udu Boy came about because Frank is the Udu man. I had to be the boy, and this is prior to the internet or around when email came around, and I was meeting some amazing people from all over the world.
Right, but you had to come up with a catchy name, right?
Yeah, a friend of mine in marketing said, if you could come up with something like a quote or a catchy name, and people kind of laugh, then they'll never forget you. So I figured Udu Boy at whatever. So now I'm uduboymusic@gmail.com.
Amazing. And we'll share that information too with audiences so they can look you up. And I saw your website. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And on there, I was also learning too about this incredible portfolio you have, where you've collaborated with artists who were working on the Food Network, and you collaborated even with artists who are local. And even at Cafe Lena, which is, a hallmark, institution here with Sarah Craig, wonderful, wonderful place. Tell us a bit about the development of the market for percussion music, what you could even call maybe world music, over the past 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful question, because probably about 25 or even 30 years ago, you would often hear folks coming from different nationalities gather as a community and play their drums in the park. African folks or people from the Caribbean islands, right? But what was so beautiful is that we did have an explosion, I would say probably about 30 years ago or so, where percussion really started to become something that people enjoyed coming together as a community. Yes, it was already happening from the nationality, but I'm talking about now cross-cultural. And a lot of that had to do with people like Baba Olatunji, who was a man that inspired me, Baba Nigerian, Yoruba, Arthur Hall, a gentleman out in the West Coast, prolific with what he was doing with healing and using drumming. And so lots and lots of us congregated to do that. Another element is that now they're using a lot of percussion rhythm music, if you will, for soundtracks. I have some sound libraries out there because people are in search of that kind of thing.
How did this all start for you, Brian? Did this start very recent? I mean, of course you have a 40-year career, but how did this all begin for you?
I was your cliche story, Laura. I hit pots and pans and roller skate cases and whatever my folks would allow me to hit. My great uncle, professional drummer at the time in this area, he worked full time for the state, but he loved drumming. He played with a lot of the big band guys that were touring through, if you will. He was a big member of the union. He made an announcement to my family when I was about 8 that they needed to buy a set of drums or he was going to.
So he really saw in you this potential that you were banging around on different types of things, improvising on different types of objects, and he was like, you know what, he's got to keep doing it.
And my sister went to a garage sale my neighbor had, saw a drum, took her allowance money and bought me a drum, which I still have in my studio.
Yeah.
But that was the beginning. And then listening to folks like Baba, you know, when I was about 17, it changed. But one thing I would really like to touch on is that when I was 13 years old and I was in middle school, we had a very prolific band teacher, Thomas Hyde. He went on to own Van Curler Music, for my friends out there that may remember Van Curler. Tom saw an opportunity for about 4 or 5 of us that were really geared to play music together. And he brought us into something that had nothing to do with the school. It was a private talent show.
Right.
We didn't win, but unbeknownst to me and him and my folks and the gentleman, his name was Jim Stotts, band leader, wonderful composer. He was creating that. He produced that.
I see.
He
Okay.
was impressed with the fact that I could play with brushes and sticks and play waltzes and Latin music. And he had a band, and his drummer was going in for an operation, and he needed a drummer to substitute. Because of Jim, because of Tom, I
Because
met
of these
Jim.
people who
Right.
really felt like, you know what, just keep going through the process, keep developing your craft.
Right.
That this is what brought it about. And I actually wanted to ask you, you know, by collaborating with, you know, bands like Gulfstream, who do a mix of like European pop from the 30s to, you know, more, you know, like Celtic and jazz groups. What is something that you've learned about the craft and the art of music that kind of surprised you over the years?
Well, the biggest thing is that as a drummer, I was lost in the instrumental side of things for a long time, but a good portion of my discography, a good portion of my career is based on working with lyricists. And so the most important thing is to listen to the song. And what I feel I do, and it's not just me, every drummer, every musician does this to some level. We're coloring. You know, if I can bring texture or a sound, a palette of colors, if you will, to support the artist and support the song, it's never obviously about undermining that. It's always about servicing the music. It's always about servicing the song or the melody. You know, I work with a lot of instrumentalists. It's probably 50-50 all the way down.
Right.
So for me, the wonderful thing that's happened, and organically it has happened, is that, you know, it may be a found sound. It could be women's jewelry. I mean, I'm not a proud guy. Resourceful, you know. I mean, dancers' belts and bell anklets and things. You know, truly, though, the greatest thing that I think I get to do every day is I get to color.
Right.
And I get to support the story.
Right. It really is like a palette, and you're just contributing to something really collaborative. So speaking of that, do you have any upcoming projects or recordings that you're really excited about?
Well, during COVID, as we all had to step way back, one of the industries for me personally that came back, I mean, obviously it never went away, but there was a bit of a lull for me in recording. And it seems that since COVID and since people had the time, because everybody's being really careful, a lot of new projects came about. Warden and Company, a contemporary folk pop, original folk pop group out of Saratoga. We have a new recording coming out. I'm embarking on a new recording with my friend Kevin McCrell, who was a guest of Aha's.
Yes.
And several others. Michael Benedict. It was a beautiful opportunity to work with Michael Benedict. We just did an in-studio performance for Planet Arts, the label that's putting his recording out. So those are all either on the verge of coming out, in the verge of starting, or in the middle of the whole process.
Great.
But I'm going to be collaborating with Ellen Sinopoli soon as well. Again, you know, the opportunity to work with dancers has existed since I was 13, and James hired me to start my career. You know, so yeah.
And like some audiences you've had the joy of watching Ellen Sinopoli and her dance troupe perform, and I'm sure it is really.
Oh, I
remarkable.
work with them all the time, as well as with Dennis Mensch and the SPAC team. We do a lot of different types of dance and music programs in schools and libraries, museums. You know, so it's really a pleasure to be able to bring that to folks.
It sounds like you really are bringing a wonderful gift to folks along with other musicians. So, Brian, thank you so much for being on A House for Arts.
Well,
it's such
really
an honor
my
to have
pleasure.
you.
Really my pleasure. Thank you so much, Laura.